Get ready. Helena Hustle is now live. Here, we will showcase successful leaders in business, athletics, healthcare, and all things that make Helena a great place to live. Join Dr. Daniel Bridge, owner of Endurance Chiropractic, as he searches out amazing individuals who are making a tremendous difference in this place we call home. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired with the Helena Hustle podcast.
Welcome to Helena Hustle. I'm joined this morning with Erik Rose out of Carroll College. Erik, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, you know how we're going to kick this thing off, right?
Of course.
Okay. I don't know you that well, so this is going to be a good test of my lie detecting skills. So let's hear your two truths and a lie.
So 2 truths and a lie. I thought pretty hard about this because I had good warning. So I tried to think of something. Hopefully I'll stump you.
Yes. Okay.
So when I was in Japan, I got a bag of the giant Japanese hornets and I cooked them and ate them. Despite being in a lot of different sports, growing up and having some sports related injuries, I've never seen a chiropractor.
Oh, Erik, you're missing out.
And then
Unless that's a lie.
when I was a kid, I would buy baby piglets, and I'd raise them all summer and then sell them at the end of the year.
I'm going to say that the giant hornets is the lie.
That's
the truth?
Yeah. They taste like popcorn.
Really?
You get the larva, the pupa, and the adolescent, so kind of all 3 stages. The wormier ones were not as good. The ones that have kind of a carapace formed already, those tasted okay fried in butter. But they give you like really bad cotton mouth. So
Really? And how big are they?
they're pretty big.
And did you see them in the wild?
Yeah, they're like really common. I was in southern Japan,
Okay.
where all the bugs are big.
Okay.
So yeah, it's the osuzumebachi, which means like giant sparrow wasp.
Wow. Are they aggressive?
They are aggressive. They are the #1 killer in Japan in terms of animals. Yeah.
Of humans?
Of humans. Yep.
Wow. I'm guessing does it need to be somebody with an allergy?
Not always. So if you stumble into a hive and get a few dozen stings, you'll be in a really, really bad time.
Wow.
So
That's crazy. Okay. So what's the lie?
you don't want to guess anymore?
I guessing the pig thing is the lie.
No, that's the truth too.
You have been to a chiropractor.
I have been to a
I see.
chiropractor. When I was a kid, I had jumped out of a tree and broke a bone in my toe.
Uh-huh.
And we didn't have a doctor in the town that I grew up in, Sealy Lake, but we had a chiropractor who went to our church.
Uh-huh.
And so my parents like called him as on the weekend.
Yeah.
It's like there won't be like a nurse practitioner in until like Thursday or Friday. Can you see our son who is like screaming, crying?
Oh,
So I was probably like 3 or 4.
Okay.
So
Was he able to help you out, get a little relief?
I mean, it was a broken toe, so he's able to confirm that, yeah, it's a broken toe. You can probably just have him crab walk for a while because as a little kid, there was no point in putting cast on it or doing anything. So,
Uh-huh. Okay. And let's hear about those baby pigs.
yeah, so I was in 4-H. When I was like in 2nd grade, elementary school teacher wanted to start a 4-H club. And so we went to this kind of like first informational meeting, and they had a pamphlet of all the different things you could do. And raising pigs was on there, market hogs. And I like told my parents, this is what I want to do. They're like, we know nothing about pigs.
Okay.
We had horses, but we didn't have any other farm animals. And I was like, I want to do pigs. And so for 4 years, I raised pigs. We always had a second one that we kept and butchered ourselves. My last year that I did it, my pig was sold for like $1,400.
Dang.
So I got 2nd place in the senior showmanship, and then it was 2nd place in the market.
Wow.
So it was a really good pig.
Well, congratulations.
yeah.
That's awesome. I think I would love to do that. Mostly just to like know what my pig ate and what I'm eating and knowing that it's healthy and good.
Yeah. It was great because we had some connections down in the Bitterroot. So every fall, the pig that we kept ourselves, we finished it on apples that had fallen.
Ooh, okay.
So kind of it just turned the meat a little sweeter, but also able to develop a lot more fat on it, where the 4-H pigs, they want them more lean, which I don't like lean pork. I like pork with a good amount of fat on it. So,
well, cool. Now, could you introduce yourself and what it is that you do at Carroll? I still want to work our way there because I know you've got some really interesting things that brought you to this point, but what is it that you do at Carroll?
Sure. So I am the Director of Institutional Research at Carroll College. A little bit about Carroll. It's a private liberal arts Catholic diocesan college of about 1,100 students, mostly undergraduate with a couple graduate programs. My role is largely data analytics. So I fulfill some required federal reporting. Every institution that receives federal financial aid, like Pell Grants, has to report to the U.S. Department of Education several statistics throughout the year. So that's my job. I also serve kind of as the data hub for all of the vice presidents and the board of trustees. So I work very, very closely with the president, who's been a really good friend and mentor for a decade now, which is kind of hard to believe. So yeah, I do data analytics, stare at spreadsheets a lot.
Fantastic. Somebody's got to, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I want to get to that, but let's work our way there. So where'd you go to college?
So I grew up in Sealy Lake and then went to school at the University of Montana.
Okay. And were you studying? What were you studying?
So I studied business. I originally wanted to be a lawyer. That was kind of my childhood dream.
Me too. Yep.
Wanted to go to law school. U of M has a law school. So I studied business administration, needed to take a language, and took Spanish when I was in high school and didn't want to do that.
I thought you were going to say Japanese, but yeah.
Well, I did take Japanese because I had made some Japanese friends.
In Missoula.
In Missoula.
Okay.
At the time, the University of Montana had a really large international student population, about 500 international students. 70 to 80 of those were Japanese. So there's a lot of Japanese students when I went there.
Okay. So did you always have an interest in data analytics?
No, I kind of fell into that. So after I graduated from college, which I tried to do everything when I was at the University of Montana. So I was in a lot of clubs, did student government. I was a resident assistant. I was homecoming king my senior year.
Nice.
So that was really fun. But I always thought I would be coming and doing something kind of business related, international business related. But when I was in Japan, I was in a small town called Mifune, which is in Kumamoto, and that's Montana's sister state. And the town has a dinosaur museum that's sister museums with the Museum of the Rockies down in Bozeman.
Wow.
And so Waded Cruzado, who's the president of MSU, she came to visit my town a couple times.
In Japan.
And I had met her when I was a student at U of M at a Board of Regents meeting.
Wow.
I said the president of the University of Montana was retiring, and it was her first year at Montana State. And I made a cheeky comment, you should apply for the U of M job. But she remembered that, and she remembered me.
Funny.
So when she came to Japan, I got to help translate for her, and that was really cool. But that led back to a job actually here in Helena.
Really?
So, yeah.
Wow. So what brought you to Japan?
When I graduated college, I had a couple job offers in Missoula, one in Havre. But like I said, I had some Japanese friends and learned about this program called the JET program. It's the Japanese Exchange and Teaching Program. And it's a Japanese federal government program that brings native English speakers to Japan to teach in elementary schools, junior highs, and high schools. So I applied for that and got in, which was pretty cool. I wanted to go someplace north that had snow and cold. but I got put someplace far to the south, which was subtropical with giant bugs and really, really hot and humid summers. But it was really cool because of all those Montana connections.
Yeah. What was the cuisine like?
I am, I guess, a pretty avid eater. I really like to try different things.
Yeah.
And so I ate anything that was weird. Japanese hornets. But our town, the area there is really, really well known for ramen.
Okay.
So I was on Kyushu, which is the southernmost of the 4 big islands. And that's kind of where a lot of the cuisine that came from China and Korea to Japan kind of started. So a lot of ramen, a lot of gyoza, the pot stickers. Our town has a lot of raw horse meat.
Interesting.
Which was, that was interesting.
Oh, don't they put that on like a little, like here we'd call it nigiri. I don't know if they call it that.
Yeah. So they do raw horse nigiri, which is good. They also do raw horse sashimi, which is no rice, just a slice of horse, which you dip in like soy sauce and garlic or soy sauce and ginger.
Yeah.
But I grew up, we always had horses, like riding horses. So the first time I tried it, I was like apologizing.
I know, to an American, that's weird, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of people who wouldn't try it, but it was good. It was really, really good. You would never buy beef again if you had horse meat, if you looked at the two just in a supermarket and didn't know which was which.
Interesting. Wow. So, I think of Japan and like you say, ramen, sushi, teriyaki. Obviously each region maybe is known for different things, but can you find those foods everywhere in Japan, or is it very regional?
Yeah, so the type of ramen is kind of regional. So in the farther south, it was much more common to have the pork broth ramen. And in Kumamoto, it's pork broth with fried garlic. So it's a lot richer. And then to the farther north, you get like a salt broth or the miso broth. Things like teriyaki sauce, that's common. It's basically like barbecue sauce. Things like soy sauce. There is some regional variation between ones that are saltier. In the southern part, it's a little sweeter. So yeah, like the US, there's foods that you can find anywhere. But a lot of the really popular kind of regional foods have made their way across the country. So.
And you were there for how long?
For 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
When you went there, you had taken some Japanese language?
Took 3 semesters in college. I was a very poor Japanese student, though.
And how you got there, how was your Japanese? Like on a percentage of 100?
Oh, maybe 5.
Okay. So you knew a few greetings and a few things.
Yep.
Were you surrounded with English speakers or mostly Japanese speakers?
So I was the only white guy in my town of 18,000 people. I had some really, really good friends who were also English teachers from the US and from a couple different countries, but they lived in other towns.
Okay, so you were forced to speak Japanese.
Yeah, so no one in my the school board office, no one there spoke any English. A lot of my English teachers had pretty broken English, and I taught at 5 elementary schools and 1 junior high. And so none of the students, well, I had 2 students who were really good English speakers, but none of the other students spoke English. And so I had to pick it up on the fly quite a bit. Spent a lot of time reading the dictionary, which was good for me. It's not a useful studying tool for a lot of people, but for me, vocabulary is kind of the biggest part, because you
can at least get your message across, even if your grammar isn't correct.
Yep.
You could say bathroom, right?
Yep. Well, and I studied, so I kind of knew the parts of speech and the basic verb conjugations. And so, yeah, I would mess up kind of word order sometimes, but if you get all the words in the sentence and then have the correct verb, people will understand.
Yeah. We went to Thailand a few years ago, and mango and sticky rice was one of the only Thai words, and they sent me to go get some sticky rice. And I was saying it, but I didn't have the right intonation. So it's kaunio. I mean, I'm probably butchering that, but that's what they would say. But I was saying kaunio. And I said it like 20 times, and the guy was just looking at me. And finally, I pointed to the sticky rice, and he's like, "Oh, kaunio." Anyway, so it's funny how you got to get, especially with, Chinese, and I'm assuming Japanese, the intonation, is it super important?
So Japanese is a linguistic isolate. So it is not like any of the other Asian languages.
Okay.
So there's no intonation.
Interesting.
It's all flat.
Okay.
But they do use a couple thousand Chinese characters.
Wow.
And so that gets tough. Like a common way to say goodbye, like see ya, is matane. And I was texting my wife, and we were just dating then. But she said, like, "Oh, I'm going to bed." And so I texted her matane, like goodbye. But my phone, it automatically changes what you write into those Chinese characters.
Oh.
And mata also means thigh. And so instead of saying like see ya, I just wrote like thigh, like kind of enthusiastically. So that was, similar. Things get lost. Good intention to try to communicate, but it doesn't come across right.
Yeah. And so I learned Spanish. I was a missionary down in Mexico, and same thing, no English speakers around. And there's words that you gotta be careful, embarrassed. If you say, embarrassed, that means pregnant. So if I'm embarrassed, you're going to send a different message. So how long were you there before you felt pretty comfortable with Japanese?
Probably 2 years. So I had a lot of elementary school students who were really, really interested in Pokemon, and I had never played any of the Pokemon games. So I had to learn like a lot of Pokemon related things so I could talk to these like second grade boys.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting. I had like fluency in really niche, worthless areas for like adult communication. But then when I met my wife, she didn't speak very much English.
So your wife's Japanese. How long had you been there when you met?
A little over a year. And so when we were dating, I really increased my studies because I really liked her and knew that if things were going to work out, is probably going to be me speaking a lot more Japanese. And so, about 2 years in, I was just able to kind of use context clues to understand what words were. So a lot more organic language acquisition style, which was great. And also teaching English. Once you are able to communicate how to learn a language in a different language, so telling kids how to learn English in Japanese, I was also able to kind of reverse that around, which helped me learn their language a lot better, especially things like grammar. English grammar is relatively complicated, and most of the rules don't make sense. But if you're able to communicate that in a different language, it gives you a lot better understanding of that language itself. So,
So did you guys get married in Japan?
We did.
Oh.
We got married. There it's a little different. You have to get married between like 9 and 4 on a weekday because you're basically filling out a form and turning it into the town office.
Okay.
So we got married in July and then planned a wedding ceremony that we had in November, which our wedding ceremony was pretty cool because it was in right next to a really large, famous castle. So Kumodo Castle's in the background of a lot of our wedding photos.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'd love to see those. So do you and your wife communicate more in English or more in Japanese?
More in Japanese.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you have a couple of kids, right?
Yeah, so our son Noah is 10 and our daughter Claire is 8.
Okay, how's their Japanese?
It's not... They understand quite a bit. They don't speak very much. So Noah was born in Japan and lived there until he was almost 2.
Okay.
And so he spoke primarily Japanese when he was a toddler.
Right.
And then when he got to preschool, no one else spoke Japanese because he was here. So he got pretty shy and stopped speaking it. Our daughter, she tries a lot harder to speak Japanese, but it's just not as good as our son's.
Sure.
Because she was born here.
Yeah.
But she's a little bit more gung-ho about it than he is.
Okay. Very cool. And so what brought you to Carroll?
Yeah, so coming from Japan to Helena, I worked at the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education, which is the state agency that oversees all the public colleges and universities. So like I said, President Cruzado from MSU came to my town, and I got to host and translate for her. The second time she came, the Commissioner of Higher Education came with her. So we had this like really awkward conversation sitting in the superintendent's office, where he knew that I was looking to go back to Montana, and I was on annual contracts, and so I probably had like 8 months left on my contract. And so he was like saying in Japanese like all these good things about me and how I'm a really good employee and they should hire me. And then I have to like translate this back to like the two top leaders in education, higher education, Montana. But after that, I found out that one of my parents' really good friends from college was a deputy commissioner at the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education. So my dad put me in contact with him, John Seck, and a few months later, there was a position open, kind of an entry-level college access position that was mostly related to the two-year colleges, so career and technical education, and that was under John. So I applied to that and got it. Worked at the commissioner's office for 4 years, and then John Seck became the president of Carroll.
Okay.
And a few months later, there's a position open there that I applied for and got. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So you've been at Carroll for how long?
So I started in the fall of 2018, worked there, and then in spring of 2022, I actually left Carroll and went and worked for a large multinational corporation called Pearson. They have four primary businesses, but I was in the higher education textbook business, and I did strategy and pricing for them. But when I got there, they announced a major restructuring, which included the elimination of the division that I was just hired in. So I worked there for 8 months and then came back to Carroll. Carroll hadn't even they hadn't filled my position.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, it's nice to come back in.
Yeah. Now, there's certain data that you need to report back to, did you say to the state?
To the federal government.
Okay.
Yeah.
And outside of those specific metrics that you're required to report, does Carroll take advantage of having you on staff and say, hey, we'd like to know, what this stat looks like or how this influences the school?
Yeah. So there's, outside of those federal reporting elements, there's also other required reporting. So we're an accredited college. So I have to provide some data reports to our accreditors. Some of our programs like nursing and education, business engineering, those also have external accreditors that require some information. And then, there's a lot of different projects that we go through that just require a number. This past year, we've been working really hard on student retention.
Okay.
So Carroll's retention rate is the best in Montana and the best in several different, when we look kind of across our region, we're the best in kind of a multi-state region, but it's still an issue that we want to see improvement on. So retention is the percentage of freshmen who return as sophomores.
Oh, okay.
And so looking at our freshman demographics and trying to split those out into really good bands in terms of academic performance.
Can you explain what a band is?
Yeah, so a lot of the information is kind of a large range of numbers. For example, one of the things that we look at is a student's expected family contribution, which when they fill out their FAFSA, it's basically how much the federal government expects a family to be able to pay for college. And then they base their financial aid on that. But that's a number that ranges from 0 up to hundreds of thousands.
Wow.
So you kind of have to put those into different bands, like $1,000 to $10,000, $10,000 to $20,000. We also have like age bands, and GPA is another one that it's on a scale, and it could be any number between 0 and 4 on a 4-point scale.
Okay.
So kind of grouping those into bands that make sense and that fit. So trying to find the break points in terms of students who are retained versus students who aren't retained. Obviously, students who come in with a higher high school GPA are more likely to be retained. The financial aid one is interesting because the students who have the lowest financial aid, the lowest expected family contribution, those students are retained at a pretty good rate. It's kind of this lower middle area that we've seen students be more likely to leave. So I provide a lot of the information, and then there's a team for retention. It's a team of academic and student affairs leaders that work on what kind of strategies can we implement to improve the student success for those underrepresented groups, for those groups that have lower performance.
That's really interesting. Was there anything else in the data that surprised you that maybe was unexpected?
Not so much for me, because I've been looking at higher education student data since 2014. So I've been involved for about 10 years now. But it is pretty interesting to think about. Carroll is a Catholic diocesan college. We also look at students' denominations and faith backgrounds. So looking at Catholic versus non-Catholic and different denominations that students list. It was interesting to me that there's not a significant variation between Catholic students and students who are in other religions, religiously affiliated with a different church, are pretty similar. However, agnostic students had a slightly lower retention rate. So I was expecting to see just something different, expecting to see Catholic students have a much higher retention rate, but it was pretty similar across religious backgrounds.
Interesting. So when you were back to the like the financial aid section, were you able to ascertain why that lowest bracket had higher retention than the 1 or 2 above them?
Yeah, so those are students who also get the most need-based financial aid. So from the federal side, it's Pell, a student Pell grant, but Carroll College also gives a lot of scholarships to students. So those are students who are getting the most financial support because they have the lowest ability to pay. So the students who receive slightly less need-based financial aid from the federal government and from Carroll, the reality is those students probably also have similar actual need. So if you're a low-income family, higher education probably isn't very high up on the list of priorities when you're trying to make payments on rent or house, meet basic food needs. So those students who are in the lower end but not the lowest end, their parents probably aren't able to contribute as much as the federal government anticipates them to be able to.
So they're not getting as much from the family, and they're not getting as much from the government, so they're more financially stressed.
Yep.
Hard to go to school, when you've got these other obligations. So interesting. Well, it's good that we've got people like you who are good at math and good at these programs and softwares to see what the numbers, what story the numbers are telling, and then contribute that to Carroll so that they can, keep people going to school. And, that's really awesome what you're doing.
Yeah. And Carroll's a major workforce driver for Montana and Helena. We are a net importer of students.
Okay.
So over half, about 60% of our students come from out of state.
Wow.
But nearly 2/3 of our graduates stay in Montana and work.
Oh, nice.
So we're bringing in out-of-state students who graduate from Carroll and then end up staying in Montana, which is really good.
Mm-hmm. If somebody was considering Carroll as one of their schools, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think Carroll's model of education is a little different. Being a private college, we really focus and emphasize on the experience. So a lot of service learning, a lot of experiential, kind of out of the classroom or applied learning occurs at Carroll, and it's a model that works. We have a smaller student to faculty ratio, so a lot more high contact type experiences with students. But our graduation rates are the best in Montana.
Wow.
When you look at Wyoming, Idaho, North Dakota, we're always at or near the very top in retention and graduation rates. Our student or graduate employment outcomes are also the best. So nearly all of our graduates are employed right after graduation. They have the highest average wages. Georgetown University's, they did a study on return on investment. Carroll College degree has the best lifetime return on investment of any college degree in Montana.
Wow.
So the outcomes at Carroll are the best.
That's phenomenal.
It's an investment in your future, and it's an investment that'll pay off. And along the way, you'll have really, really caring faculty and staff who are going to help guide you to your chosen vocation.
That's great. I feel like I would have really enjoyed that kind of a setting. I'm not really a classroom type of person. My eyes glaze over pretty quickly. But if you get me outside or get something more practical or hands-on, I just think, it's a lot easier to kind of daydream in those settings. So what a nice thing that they've figured out for their students.
Our motto is not for school, but for life. So you see that a lot just in the ethos of how we deliver education. We are relatively rigorous, so a little bit higher academic expectations.
Be prepared to work.
But also, the other side of that is the for life aspect. So really trying to produce humans, adults who are leaders, who are caring, empathetic, have a good understanding of social justice and how helping others really just improves the entire world. Better care for our common home. So responsibility to take care of the environment and take care of this world and place that we all share.
Great. Well, Erik, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show. It sounds like an invaluable service that you're providing to Carroll, and then Carroll just seems like a great opportunity for a lot of people who are really looking for that opportunity to set themselves up for the rest of their life. So,
well, thanks so much for having me. This has been a great time.